The stockyards started as an idea from a guy named Alexander Hamilton Swan, who was a cattle baron in Wyoming, who got tired of losing cattle going all the way to Chicago. So he decided to create a feed lot in South Omaha because of the water and food available at that place. In about 4 years after they made a feedlot, they brought in packing houses, the first one being the Hamel packing house. And before you know it, more and more came in, and it grew into, from a feedlot into a stockyards. And by 1892, it was worth $3.5 million. It kept growing and growing and growing. They kept adding on to it. And as it grew, South Omaha grew around the stockyards. And that's where all the ethnic groups came in, and they had their vestiges around the stockyards, but they would all intermingle and work in the stockyards and the packing houses. At one time, the packing houses and stockyards employed over 50% of the people indirectly or directly of Omaha. So it was like the key area of Omaha. South Omaha really grew simply because every week people would be bringing cattle, hog, and sheep in, and they would keep coming in from all over the Midwest. And when they did that, they were bringing in all the economic growth. So stockyards was one of the reasons why Omaha grew to be a massive city. It became the #1 stockyards in the world in 1955, October 27, when 42,000 head of cattle, sheep, and hogs were brought in one weekend. And it took over a week to actually process those. And at that time, the goal for Omaha was always to overcome Chicago and become the #1 stockyards. And we became the #1 stockyards in the world. That lasted until 1972. Then eventually, as the packing houses moved out and moved to smaller locations, and the need for a large stockyards no longer was as feasible with the invention or with the perfection of the refrigerated trucks and the ability to be able to bring sell the cattle anywhere. It went down and eventually closed in 1999 when it completely came down. Currently, it's an area for different businesses and things like that. And the actual stockyards in Omaha moved to Red Oak. And that we still do have a small stockyards in Red Oak, which is the precursor to Omaha stockyards. Stock Exchange building was the third livestock exchange building. The first one that they created when they had the feedlot was a farmhouse, a Drexel farmhouse, and they had a tavern and a store in the basement, and the kitchen, they used the doors in the kitchen for the bank. And they basically eventually then they outgrew that, and they did a one-story one, eventually added on a hotel and restaurant onto that. And in 1924, they wanted to show just how big they've become, so they invested in an 11-story building. It was Peter Kiewitz's first $1 million building, and Everett Buckingham, who was the head of the stockyards at that time, became glorified for building that building. It was called the Little City because there was so much in there you could literally go in and not have to leave. You had a post office, you had banks, you had restaurants, you had taverns, you had clothing stores, you had apartments, you had a cigar store that would sell 1,000 cigars a day. And you literally could go in there, and then you had on the top floor, which you had in between the top floor and the commercial floors, you had the commissioners. And the commissioners were the people that would buy and sell the cattle. Because what a stockyards was simply was a holding tank for people to bring their cattle and sheep and hogs in to be sold, to be slaughtered. And commissioners would do the buying for them, and then they would give the people their money. So that was the middlemen. So you had all these commission forms, up to 47 at one time in there. And on the top floor, of course, you had the banquet halls. And that's where all the celebration would took place. And in 55, when it became #1, they had a massive celebration up there about overcoming it. We even had signs out there that said we were #1. And it'll always stand as a symbol for future generations when they ask, why is that big building standing there, that you can tell them the story of the largest stockyards in the world.